Thank you very much. And I'm really honored to be here on this panel and see old friends, especially Jim, who I've worked with in New Hampshire as he's done extraordinary work to raise awareness about the corrupting influence of money across the country, but especially in the States. I just had the honor of arguing a case in the Alaska Supreme Court, which was arguing to the Alaska court that there's no reason the sovereignty of Alaska should be crushed by these federal authorities to say that Alaska can't protect itself against large contributions or outside spending and contributions so that it has a democracy, a representative democracy that would be, as Madison promised, the American democracy, the Congress would be, quote, dependent on the people alone. And more importantly, dependent on Alaskans alone. And I think that this point that Jim is making is extremely valuable to recognize that this issue that Jim was talking about is not a right-left issue. It's a pro or anti-democracy issue. It's about who controls your democracy. Do your citizens control your democracy? Do all of your citizens control your democracy? Or do a few, whether they're out-of-staters or the very rich like Mike Bloomberg? But Jim approaches this question through Congress. And I have to confess, I'm not an admirer of Congress. In my career as a constitutional law professor, I've had the chance to observe legislatures around the world. And when I hear people say America is the greatest democracy, I say, are you talking about Congress? Because the reality is Congress is an embarrassment. The institution of Congress, the deliberations in Congress, the reflection in Congress is an embarrassment. Any number of legislatures around the world are infinitely better. But I say, are you talking about state legislatures? And then I'm with you. Because in this process of trying to build the Article 5 movement, I've had the privilege to watch many state legislatures across the country. And the way they do their work is exactly what Madison was imagining when he was imagining Congress. I had the privilege of testifying in New Hampshire about a ranked choice voting bill. And this was a committee hearing, and there were probably 20 members on the committee. And that committee sat in a committee room for 4 hours. Nobody had a phone out. Nobody had newspapers out. They sat there 4 hours, every one of them, listening to testimony of a wide range of ordinary citizens and experts and everybody about ranked choice voting. And I leaned over to my colleague and I said, could you imagine this happening in the United States Congress? And the answer is no, because they've lost the ideal of democracy tied to the people. And I think that ideal lives in the states if it lives at all in America. And that's why this institution that you have here to rally states to understand their power is so critical. Congress, when the framers of the Constitution, when they were just about finished, George Mason stood up on the floor of the convention and he reflected on the manner by which the Constitution at that moment could be amended. And at that moment, the only way the Constitution could be amended was for Congress to propose an amendment. And George Mason said, well, what if Congress is the problem? And they had a kind of, Simpsons dumb moment. Yeah, obviously, they needed something if Congress is the problem. And so what they created was the Article 5 process for allowing states to call on Congress to convene a convention. And the only power the convention has, don't listen to my friend Robert Reich, who makes up what the Constitution does. The only power the convention has is the power to propose amendments. But it's a critical power because it is independent of Congress. And if Congress becomes the problem, we need a power independent of Congress. So I agree with Jim in identifying the two problems that infect this Congress, the perpetual tenure that members of Congress have, as well as the money that's corrupting Congress. But I am skeptical that they will, on their own, propose the amendment to change those two things. What I'm certain of is that people outside of Congress, reflecting on the failure of that institution, could have the integrity and the courage to propose what needs to happen. And if that happened through a convention, I'm quite confident we could get 3/4 of the states to ratify it. You have an important role, a critical role. In this last election, we saw the consequence of the independence of states. Even when there's political alignment, the independence of states was the integrity of this election process. And we need to continue that in this cycle if we're going to restore something incredibly important about our democracy. Thank you very much for inviting me.